You're listening to Unjiggered, a bartender podcast where we interview highly successful bartenders about their careers, lives, and the passion of bartending. This week we chat to Mr David Ong, founder of the Curator Coffee and Cocktails, Otto, and EDSA Beverage design group, all based in the Philippines. Learn how an economics and psychology graduate made his way into the Canadian coffee industry and brought his knowledge and passion back to his hometown of Manila in the Philippines. With this podcast, we want to peel back the mask and discover just how the greats really became the greats. So sit back and enjoy.
My name is David Ong. I'm from Manila, Philippines. I run a few joints there, one being EDSA Beverage Design Group, one being the Curator Coffee and Cocktails, and one being Otto.
So, thank you very much for finding the time to sit down with us here in sunny Singapore. We would like to little bit cover what is it that you did in the past. We know that you have a strong interest in coffee, and you have a strong interest in cocktails. But first of all, let's start with the beginnings. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so basically when I was in university, I was in Canada, I was in Vancouver, and I was studying economics and psychology. So I finished that. All the while that I was there, I was working part-time jobs. And it was in retail at first, so clothes, basically. So eventually, I worked my way into a coffee shop, which was called Blends, a Canadian coffee company. Mm-hmm. And then eventually another one called My Cup. So it was really just to learn, operations and stuff like that, and just see, what business I could take back to Manila, like if I do decide to move back and, not work abroad for a bit. So that was really what got me started in hospitality. But basically, before I went home, the plan was to be either a banker or explore hospitality in hotels, actually, because I was working in Shanghai for a year. That was in 2010, and that's actually the time that I got into cocktails as well. I was celebrating my graduation, supposedly, because I didn't go back to Vancouver to March, and it was in a cocktail bar called El Cocktail. But it was in Shanghai that I got an offer for Hyatt, like one of the Hyatt hotels over there. So
in Shanghai?
Yeah, in Shanghai. Okay. Yeah. So it was either banking or hospitality.
Do you speak Chinese?
A little bit.
Okay.
Very little.
So you mentioned what kind of business I can bring back to Manila. Was going back to Manila on the books from the very get-go, or is this something that grew on you later?
Definitely. It was it was definitely part of the plan. Because I had been away, at that time I had been away already for about 6-7 years. And, my parents told me, okay, well, do whatever you want. Just make sure that you do your best and, come home, eventually. But they didn't say, when or whatnot. But for me, if I were to come home, I'd like it to be at my own terms.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the thing for me, looking for opportunities that aren't in Manila just yet. And just trying to do it the best way that we can.
So, when you decided to go back to Manila, what sort of opportunities have you identified?
Yeah, so I basically had a 5-year goal, and it was definitely in coffee and cocktails. So,
how did you fall in? So, you worked in a couple of coffee shops, and what is it about coffee that made you fall in love with it?
Yeah, so to be honest, at first it was just having a good cup of coffee that is better than what was available in Manila. So it wasn't really about specialty coffee yet. And then when I went back to Vancouver for job hunting in 2011, that's when I got into specialty coffee. The first specialty coffee shop called Revolver had just opened. That's when I was like, whoa, I thought I knew something, but I didn't. And so that overwhelming feeling that I had, similarly to El Cocktail in Shanghai, it just took over me, really. And, the thing about specialty coffee is that it's not just, ordering an espresso or a latte or, a black coffee or whatever, but you really go to the nitty-gritty. You talk about the origins, how it's grown, where it comes from, the terroir, the climate, everything about that, the processing that's involved for each bean, whether it's a natural, a washed, or whatever. And then you have the roasting aspect, and then you have the, of course, for baristas, when it gets to the shop, it's the actual product. So it's your main job as a barista is to calibrate these the best way possible so that you can extract the nuances in an espresso or a filter coffee. And so it's just all of these things and just the curiosity for them.
The specialty coffee shop you mentioned, a Revolver, is it still open?
It's still open. Yes, it's in Vancouver. It's in Gastown. And they actually took over the tattoo parlor next door.
Okay.
And then they turned it into a showroom for stuff that they're selling, as well as more seating. But they don't roast their own coffee. What they do instead is that they get from multiple coffee roasters. So they're multi-roasters, and then they're able to extract it as espresso, but mostly as filter.
They
So,
do
yeah.
mostly filter coffee.
Yes, like if you go, well, they do mostly espresso probably, but like if you go into the shop, the first thing that you will see are 6-cup Chemexes that look like our glasses, and then you'll see metal filters on top, and they're all in weighing scales. Everything that they have is pre-dosed, so it goes straight to the box grinder. Then it's very meticulous actually. Then only after that will you see the espresso machine and whatnot.
It's super cool. And what were you doing there?
So I was I was studying in Vancouver in UBC, and then I worked in Shanghai for a year. So it was me going back to Vancouver and job hunting, and just looking around and figuring out my life basically.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And what do you think? Do you think the market was ready for specialty coffees in Vancouver at the time?
Oh yeah,
Or-
absolutely. I mean, even before there was already an appreciation for good coffee. When I say good coffee, it's just coffee that's roasted fresh. And if you drink it with milk, good quality milk, which Vancouver obviously has, right? And so these two elements alone, like they already had it. So I feel like it was ready for it. And then Vancouver also being in the Pacific Northwest, is so close to Seattle and Portland, and these are Vancouver's neighbors were already doing things that I guess were around the realms of specialty coffee. Then it really broke out afterwards, and then I guess like Vancouver just came a bit later, but it was definitely ready for that.
Yeah. That's where Starbucks is from, right? Seattle?
Oh yes, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, in Pike's Place Market. Yeah, that's where it is from. And then they just franchised everywhere. So coffee town. Seattle is definitely a coffee town.
So when you identified this opportunity and you decided to come back to Manila, do you think there was a market for specialty coffee or not?
That's tough. Like I guess for either specialty coffee or just craft cocktails or just cocktails done well, there wasn't anyone for either except for Blind Pig. I remember when you were in Manila, I took you over there, and they had just opened at that time. And so I would say that maybe Manila wasn't ready, but then somebody had to do it or somebody had to push it, and for us it was about time that we came into the picture. Like it was just right timing, I feel. But if you compare it to now, though, there's definitely a lot more interest. The pie is a lot bigger for both coffee and for cocktails. So I would say the market's more ready, or rather, it's more ready right now than it was 5 years ago. That's for sure.
So how did you go about opening your own coffee company? Like, would you like to talk to us through the stages? Because like, okay, you studied in Vancouver, you had your working experience in Shanghai. You, I believe at this point, are set like, okay, you know what, I want to do this in Manila. How did you go about it? What were the steps?
So, basically what happened was I turned 25, and this was in Vancouver, and it's like, okay, well, what do I really want to do, right? So, I came up with a 5-year goal, and the first, I definitely wanted to open a specialty coffee shop and the cocktail bar. I just didn't know where or with who or whatever. By this time, I had acquired some knowledge and skill. I mean, definitely is a bit more polished right now, so it is rudimentary, but I felt like it was something that I wanted to do rather. So the first year goal was to just get my feet wet again. Like I hadn't lived in Manila for a couple of years, and then by at that time I was also helping my father out with one of his businesses, which is actually microfinance. So it's a bit far from hospitality. So that's when I met a lot of our good friends in the food and beverage industry in Manila. For some reason, the time that I went home was the same time that my partners from Curator went home. Erwan went home as well. And then Erwan and we have like these other friends who run a couple of other restaurants that are quite influential in the F&B scene. They all had just got home as well. So we were all like just starting at the same time actually. So there's a lot of like, support and egging each other on so that we reach our goals and whatnot. So I guess that was a strong contributor, I feel. Eventually, like when I got home, after the first year, I met my partners at the Curator. One is Jerickson Ko, and the other one is Bernice too, and the other one is Tiffany Yu. So Like Jerickson though is like my better half for both the Curator and also EDSA BDG, where when you were in Manila, I brought you over there. So his mind, like he's actually really brilliant. Like like he's like a walking encyclopedia. Like he just absorbs everything. So super random how I met him. Like it was in another coffee shop called Craft Coffee Workshop. It was the first specialty coffee shop that had opened in Manila. And, I was just sitting there minding my own business. I had my coffee. And then I also had some guest beans that, I had from Hong Kong. And I was just sharing it with the barista, who now works with us, by the way, in EDSA as our head roaster. You met him, Nico.
Yeah, of course.
So that was him. And then, like, I hear this guy next to me, Jerickson, talking to this other girl, who happens to be our other partner, by the way, Bernice. Talking about how he's banned from a bubble tea store because his ginger beer that he was fermenting exploded.
No way.
Yeah, so I was like, wait, who is this guy? And he's talking about cocktails and stuff like that. And we're in a specialty coffee shop. These are things that I was interested in and I had goals for. So from then on, it was just we just hit it off, and the rest is history, really.
I guess it was meant to be, right?
I guess so. Yeah, I definitely think it was meant to be. Like it was like I didn't know who I was doing it with. Like of course, like when you go to Manila, you rekindle your friendships with your friends or even like relationships with your family and whatnot. But I'm sure you know this. Like it's different when you meet somebody or a group of people who have the same interests. It makes things a lot easier. And I guess that was like the stepping stone into our goals, which was the Curator EDSA.
So the first thing you did, I guess it was opening the actual coffee shop, which is
yes.
Curator.
So the first concept that we did is called the Curator Coffee and Cocktails, and even before we had this physical space, like we were already testing the concept. Our first event was care of my uncle, who's into fashion in the Philippines. One of the brands he carries is Fred Perry.
Mm-hmm.
So this year marks the 6th year that we did a Fred Perry Cafe. So what happens is that for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of Father's Day weekend, we would serve free coffee and sometimes bottled cocktails. There's one year where we actually did cocktails on the spot as well. So that was our first event. And we were in 4 Fred Perry stores. And then the following week, we had another event. And it was for this other man named JJ Yulo. And it was the same thing, just testing the concept in a 3-day event where we were selling coffee and cocktails. And then, Jerickson's brother, Jonathan, was a partner in this wine shop called Cyrano in Makati, Legazpi Village. And, they had like a small 45 square meter space that they were subleasing. And that's what we occupied basically. So the first few months, it was like a makeshift bar, monoblock chairs and tables, pixie lights, and just like really inviting friends over and seeing, whether this concept or this idea could work. Because it was, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for coffee and then 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. for drinks, right? So,
it's sort of a two places in one, right?
Exactly. So, it made sense to us. And for us, like, we just wanted it for ourselves because we love to drink coffee and we love cocktails as well. So it was really more for us in the beginning. And then when we were a bit more confident and with the space and also the concept, that's when we started working on the actual space that we have right now. But at the same time, we were already working on our other concept, which is EDSA Beverage Design Group. So Jerickson is my partner there as well. And this is where we have the roastery. This is where we bottle sodas, ginger beers, and even cocktails. We started bottling cocktails it was during our first year actually. And then, now we do a bit of other things as well, like distillates and whatnot.
But what I find interesting is that you had the bar, right? And
right.
At this point, was the bar successful when you decided to open that?
It's very slow, for sure. Like,
Okay.
I like for the first 3 months, like we would only serve about maybe, actually, the pilot testing before we renovated helped a lot already. So I'm not certain if we should count those months, but if we do count those months, like the first few real months where we were serving coffee and cocktails, it was like maybe 5, 15, 20, 25 maximum that we would serve in a day for both coffee and for cocktails. But then when we opened for real, the first month, like at least we were kind of established already, in the sense of the word that people
would know you exist.
Yeah, exactly. Would know we exist because of the events that we've done for JJ and for my uncle and also for other people and whatnot. But I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say it was busy. Like, definitely not.
But at this stage, considering that the bar was still in the process of establishing its position in the market, what made you think that EDSA Beverage Group was the next logical step for you?
Well, for us, like, we wanted to go into the production of coffee. This was the main thing. Both as as a passion project, but also as a business. Because, like, if you're in retail, you'll know that, especially in coffee, that you need to sell a lot of coffee, to make money. But then you think of the business of it and the production of it. That's where you actually make some money. And so that was the business. But at the same time, it was very important for us to do it right, which is why we looked out for different suppliers, even farms to work with, etc., and source our beans correctly. And then, of course, as you saw also, we tried to take care of every step, which is creating profiles for roasting, for the different beans and blending, and also execution. So all of these were put into consideration. And so for us, it was definitely a natural step, because we had it was a different angle. So instead of retail, this is like production, and when we do this, we're able to help a lot more people. Basically, it's people who wanted to set up their own cafes as well. So that's for us, like, it was a way to grow the pie too.
What was the market reaction to, not necessarily Curator, we touched on that, but more about the EDSA Beverage Group and your coffee roasting program?
Yeah. Well, the reception was, I would say there was a little bit of a buzz, just because we came in together with another competitor of ours, actually. They're called Yardstick, pretty much at the same time. And it is so new to Manila, where you would source high quality, specialty grade coffee. And when you say specialty coffee, these are graded 80 to 100 from a 100-point scale system. And so, it's not cheap, like, to buy these coffees, especially when everybody's used to commercial coffees such as Starbucks, Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and Settles Best and stuff. So it takes a little bit of commitment. And I think people who were in the know, especially in the food and beverage scene, appreciated it a bit. And from there, it kind of just became word of mouth to, I guess, futures and whatnot. And then people started taking notice of us. And only then did they partake.
What were the challenges that you had trying to establish yourself as a beverage operator in the Philippines?
So, something like that, and our space is pretty big as well. It's almost 500 square meters. Of course, we always have to think about overhead. And when you think about overhead, meaning how much beans are we buying, how much coffee equipment are we buying, if we buy these things, we definitely have to sell it, right? So your question earlier was the market ready for it? My answer is no, just because people didn't know what they wanted yet. But then now, though, there are definitely a lot more restaurants, for example, that are more conscious about the coffee they serve. There's a ton more, specialty coffee shops. And so, not only is the pie bigger, but, we're able to move these products. So it was definitely a challenge doing that, like just building it, brick by brick. And I feel like right now we're just at that cusp of just breaking out and, just having a real boom, a real coffee boom.
So the Philippines has the climate to produce coffee, right?
Yes, we do.
And also has the terroir, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are you doing specifically to try to get Filipino coffee to be recognized as a leading coffee in the world? Because this is something that you're trying to do, am I correct?
It is something that we support. It's just a bit difficult because, if you're familiar with third world countries and farmers, bigger organizations kind of tempt them to sell most, if not all, of their produce at supposedly a decent rate. So instead of doing quality, it's more quantity. So I won't name organizations, but I think it's a bit understandable. But so for us though, like what we try to do is when we first opened, there was another group called Calzada Coffee. And it was these two girls. One's called Carmel from the US and the other one's called Lacey. And they started Calzada Coffee just by, having this vision of trying to promote Philippine coffee in a better light. Because when you think about Philippine coffee, it's like dark and robust and earthy and just like really bitter. And so they wanted to change that mindset. So they came to us. They asked if we could help out in terms of sharing our facility, meaning our roastery, our bagging area, etc. With them, and so we did for the first 2 years. And so what they did was they would explore different farming communities. One being Benguet, which is north of the Philippines, when that's basically their mothership. So they built like a small processing center where farmers could deposit their beans and they would process it themselves. So now though, in the last 2 years, 3 years, their beans, their coffee beans have been awarded specialty grade quality by the Specialty Coffee Association of America. So that's great. So it's supporting small endeavors like that. Because we know that we can't do it. Like it's pretty difficult as is already to manage a retail operation as well as a roasting facility. So it would take even more resources to be on the ground on the farm and time and effort. So these guys were doing it right, and so we thought that it would be good to help them out. But then there are other farms as well. Like there's one we work with called Cocotos Estate in Davao, Mount Apo. So that's south of the Philippines. And then there's another one called Hinelaban Coffee Foundation. It's in Bukidnon, also in the south of the Philippines. And then there's another one up and coming that's from Ifugao. So there's Philippine coffee is rising. It's just a matter of convincing farmers to grow it properly and not to harvest it when it's not ready. But then it's very difficult to tell them to do so because if they need money and they need to sell it, then you can't really blame them either, right? So that's a problem for sure. That's definitely a hurdle. So today we're proud to say that we finally are able to sell 3 Philippine origins sustainably in the sense that we get it consistently. And and by doing this, we're able to promote it not only in Manila but also when we travel.
Do you think that there's a problem with the price of coffee, meaning that big companies tend to buy for such low rates that does not allow farmers to grow it the way that they want to grow it?
Yeah, well, I think that I can't really speak for the farmers, to be honest, but I would assume that if they're able to grow their crops all year round, then they probably wouldn't change something that's broken. But then if they're blessed with terroir and also just a good seedling and a good product after it's been harvested, then I guess to me the challenge there is again not to sell it to big companies, but how much of that goes back into improving infrastructure and irrigation, for example, I'm not very certain unless somebody else steps in, like for example Calzada Coffee, and shows them the way. But if I feel like if you leave it to the farmers, they're just gonna grow it and then they're just gonna spend for their daily needs, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's not an easy market because it's very different because you have this relationship in between you who like work with the coffee beans and people who grow the coffee beans, and there's a certain degree of disconnect because you don't own the farms and you don't have the expertise on how to do it, but you require a specific product, right?
Right.
So it's a big challenge, but I'm glad to see that there's more and more like I guess success stories coming up.
Yeah.
As you mentioned,
it's rising for sure. Mm-hmm. Like Philippine coffee is rising.
Let's talk a little bit about the cocktail program in the Curator. Yeah, sure. What sort of drinks have you had in mind when you opened this bar? What sort of bar did you want to deliver?
Right. So in the beginning, this was in 2013. We opened formally in December of that year. It's very straightforward, just classic cocktails and our own twists on these classic cocktails. So we didn't really do anything crazy. We'll probably change one ingredient up. May it be like a modifier or whatnot. We weren't thinking about distillation yet or fermentation. Maybe just rubs at that point. So it was very, very straightforward. We just wanted a nice atmosphere where people could drink classic cocktails or twists of these cocktails, and also for us to be able to deliver our best hospitality. That was the goal. So that kind of transformed though, the second year, the third year, and even to this day, as we got better at doing what we do. So we started taking note of what our neighbors were doing. I mean, Singapore, even before we opened, we already visited and we already saw what the Jigger and Pony guys, the 28 Hong Kong Street guys were doing. And, there's several others. And I feel like even for Singapore, they would, most bars and bartenders would say that they also started the scene. So, I feel like even Singapore has come a long way since then. And for us, like, having that like as I guess like as a barometer, if you would call it, for or a measure of what a bar can be in Asia was a huge help, I think. So that's when we started changing the way that we saw ourselves. So instead of it being for ourselves, we, obviously wanted it to be, how do you say it? We wanted people to come to Manila and see what we had to offer as well. So we worked towards that, and we continue to work towards that up to this day.
How important was for you to create the right atmosphere, and how important was for you to create the right drink, and how did you balance the two?
Yeah. So at first, like I gotta say, like maybe we're a little bit too self-righteous with ourselves and how we wanted to lead the experience. Like, if you look at our menu, we have some house rules. I think it was the first or the second menu where we actually said that, if you want beer, then you can get it lukewarm, in a convenience store down the street for 900 pesos. Like, we're a bit too cocky, but it is like our kind of humor. And so we've definitely loosened up a lot, I feel. So we toned down on the seriousness. So, but that's not to say that we're super casual. But at the same time, like, we just wanted to make everyone comfortable. So the experience happens like when you walk into the door, when you're greeted by the staff, when you're seated down, just like any other, good bar where you have like the menu given to you and your water glass never being empty. So these were the standards in the beginning. And then the drinks came, to be honest, afterwards. And of course, that's not to say that we didn't give thought to it. But we would take a lot of feedback actually from guests, because in the beginning, like of course, what guests would always order are the classics, which is old-fashioned whiskey sour Negronis, and it still is that case up to this day. But then we got better, like in terms of service, where we would say, would you like to try something else? And so we would offer the current menu offering or a special or maybe a drink that we were working on. And so did the customers, they adjusted as well. So instead of ordering what they would normally order, they would ask, what do you think? Like, is there something you want to serve me? So they become more adventurous as well and more open. So I would say it's like two-way. It wasn't really just us thinking of like I did mention that in the beginning. It was like us doing things for us, and wanting us to drink good coffee and good cocktails. But then we transformed to it being more of like a synergy with our guests, and I guess with our neighboring countries, and just seeing what we can deliver. And to us, like, it's definitely hospitality and service first, and then just trying to push the boundaries with drinks, but not being too technical, because sometimes guests can be for the lack of a better term, like intimidated by it. So we try not to make our guests feel uncomfortable in that sense.
Yeah, of course. Try to break it down as much as possible.
Exactly. Like we just stick to like, so example, if like now if we distill something, we'll still let's say like a tomato water distillate or something. If we distill it, we won't actually put tomato distillate. We'll just put like tomato. Then if they're curious about the process, then we explain it to them. So it's kind of like that still. Like,
this layer of accessibility. So
exactly. It's very, very important.
So, and after that, so I guess when you opened Curator, at the very beginning, you were one of the first bars in the Philippines.
Yes.
Therefore, this comes with its own challenges, right?
For
For
sure.
instance, I'm sure staffing was an issue,
Yes.
right? How did you go about training your staff?
Yeah. So in the beginning, we thought that experience actually mattered. So if somebody was bartending before or somebody was making coffee before, that it would be a plus. But then what we realized as we went through different interviews was that personality was even more important, because these people would be extensions of us, like when they face the customers. And by saying that, like I don't know if you know, but like when you're in the Philippines, you have this like ma'am sir mentality. It's kind of like an inferiority complex where the customer is king, and we always say this in hospitality, the customer is king, and it is true. But it's different to look them straight into the eye and say, hey, welcome to my home. This is what we're serving you. And so that is what we were trying at. Exactly. And and so when we were hiring people, we were trying to look for people who have the personality and the confidence to deliver that, and not necessarily the skill, because the skill aspect, that's what we worked on anyway. So we're proud to say that we have a pretty decent roster today, and also like even those who have left us. For example, over here in Singapore, we have our very first bartender that we hired, Yoma Rivera, and to me, like, he's still one of the best bartenders that I look up to as well, like as a colleague, because like he's just grown so much and he's learned so much. So just seeing that, like it gives us a hope, even for the next person that we hire. I guess we're like in a way like we're doing okay in terms of building a foundation and also a future like for these people. So yeah, definitely like personality first. Second is like the attitude, like towards the workplace and your colleagues, and of course the third thing is it's always about the team. So if we are able to identify these three, like in a potential bartender or barista that we're interviewing, then we're definitely open to training these people with or without experience.
So let's talk about Otto.
Yes. Yeah.
How did you come up with the idea?
Yeah. So Otto is with a different set of partners. So these are actually people I grew up with. Like I've known them since I was like grade 4. I was probably about 9 or 10 years old at that time. But we all went to a all-boys private school in the Philippines called Xavier. So 2 of the boys, they're brothers, Miguel and Martin. Their family owns a restaurant in the Philippines called Manhan, which is basically like it's like Filipino Chinese comfort food. And their father their father his parents, they like to entertain. So whenever we go to their house, they would cook first, and then eventually we'd wind down. So we hit a few bottles of whiskeys and beers, and then eventually settled down into basically a room where it was audio sound systems, different turntables and vinyl records and stuff like that. And we're just chilling there, and a lot of the times we weren't even talking. We're just like, hey, can we play this next album next, this song or whatever? And like we just sit there, listen, and just be quiet. So the idea kind of like branched out, or the idea started from that, rather. It was inspired from that. So Otto means sound in Japanese. And if you go there, it's basically it's a music room or a listening room rather. But of course, music's free, so we had to attach it to a bar as well as a kitchen, and that's where I came in basically. So yeah, that's Otto.
When did you guys open Otto?
Otto we opened 2 years ago, last January 2017 officially. Yes.
How did you go about choosing what music to play?
We still struggle with that to this day. But if you look at the neighborhood where Otto is situated, it's in this neighborhood called Poblacion, which is very young and thriving. And so for sure on a Friday and Saturday night, our music preferences would lean towards something that's a bit more mainstream. And what would be mainstream to the youth would be, indie rock music, hip hop and R&B and that kind of thing. Maybe sometimes like, some 90s music for both pop and hip hop as well, and rap. Just because these are the ones that are a lot more fun. People would want to stay, and order drinks and stuff like that. But it's also music that we enjoy. But on other nights, then that's where we can experiment a little bit with the crowd. Because they aren't usually so young. They're around, my age. I'm pretty old. I'm 32. So 32 and a bit older. So that's when we'd play like jazz or like even like old school rock, or even like I have a partner who actually enjoys techno.
Okay.
Yeah, so we actually have nights where it's like it feels like very Berlin kind of electronic, like techno music and stuff. So I find it like a bit strange, but like for some people it works. It works, but and there is a niche for it. So we do like to experiment with like different genres, but ultimately we try to make it accessible to everyone.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the main, because music is such a big aspect of bars.
No,
right?
definitely. I mean, like personally, like if I went into a cocktail bar and they were playing techno music, I'd be like,
yeah, there's a bit of a disconnect there. Right?
Yeah, right. Like so, you can't abuse it too much either.
Yeah, but it's also such a jazz-dominated industry, the cocktail bar industry.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially for listening rooms. Like when you think of like a vinyl record shop, normally you'd think either a jazz bar or like a rock and roll bar. Like usually that's what people associate vinyl records with in general when you say it's a vinyl bar.
When you were so being in the Philippines comes with its own challenges, I suppose. You must have had some sort of issues trying to get attention towards the Philippines at the very beginning, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like even up to this day, to be honest.
So how did it feel when you were nominated for Asia 50 Best?
Oh, it meant a lot for sure. Like so Asia's 50 Best Bars has been happening since 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And fortunately, the curator has been on the list since. And it does help put the Philippines on the map. But at the same time, it helps with foot traffic and the bar being busy. But it was only until 2 years ago that Asia's 50 Best Bars actually had a physical ceremony for it. And that changed everything, I feel. Not only for us, but I feel for all the bars that are not necessarily on the list, but who are visiting as well. Just because you actually meet these people, and before it was like, oh, you're on the list. Please wait for this day for a live countdown on Instagram from 50 to 1. And everybody would have like their own screening or viewing parties in their own bars, and that's all social media. Like everybody would like congratulate, like if there's like 49 and this bar flashes up, congratulations. It's like it's so live. Basically, it was like a party on your phone, but there's something about like the ceremony being how do you say it, like a physical engagement or a personal engagement rather, that makes the world a lot smaller. So I feel like that really helped. Like just having a physical ceremony, in Capitol Theatre here in Singapore 2 years in a row and meeting everybody in this one room. Everybody's just there. But, for us, like, we've been fortunate enough, these last few years to travel quite a bit for guest shifts. So that room was already small to begin with, but it gives a chance to nurture these relationships. So, these things like definitely help, put, I feel, any country on the map.
What is it that helps you to get inspiration about drinks and concept developments? Is it traveling mostly?
Definitely traveling, and also food.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a firm believer, whether it's drinks or not, that traveling makes you a better person. Because you're not only exposed to the landscape and the city, but also the people, the language, just in general the culture, and in that culture, and you have like all these different things like food and beverage, art, etc. And I love to eat too, so definitely food. And then of course, like if I walk into a bar and like they're doing something that's nuts, for example, like I remember this guest shift that the Clumsies had at Native, and it's such simple drink. Basically it's a banana old fashioned, and at least for me, like it's so rare that I have these drinks that are like when you take the first sip, it's like bang. So that one for me is like it was like instant inspiration. And basically what he did was like he just fermented the banana for like a month, like 25 days to 30 days in a cabinet or a room specifically meant for fermenting. And then he blended it, and then he blended it with whiskey, and then just like coursed it through a centrifuge. Very simple, except expensive, because like not everyone can afford a centrifuge. And then it was like just verjus, and then I just made an old fashioned out of it. But it was just so simple, but like so delicious. So stuff like that, like things that are, I feel like, mind blowing and not necessarily easily replicated because you don't really want to copy a drink, but just thinking of the process, which in this case was fermentation. For other cases would be distillation, clarification, and whatnot. Just adding it to your toolbox and trying to refine it and make it your own. Like I feel like these are all important in inspirations, and especially for us. But definitely food, and when a drink comes along that just like blows your mind, you just want to learn more about it, and that's where I guess like an exchange of knowledge happens within our industry, and that's where inspiration comes from for us, I feel.
You mentioned a very positive aspect of guest bar shifts, which is you get exposed to different bars that perhaps you wouldn't have access to if they didn't come here to Asia to you.
Oh yeah,
but
for sure.
Do you think that, especially here in Asia at the moment, the guest bartending mentality is a bit too much?
I would say that it's two ways. So for me, there's definitely there's a lot of positives to it. Especially for, let's say, a country like the Philippines, where most bartenders, for example, I'm not even thinking of the drinkers and the consumers, I'm thinking of the bartenders, the ones who actually do the work, are not able to travel and try different drinks from bars that are already institutions, or even meet bartenders who are supposedly rock stars, right? So it's a big deal, when a guy like Alex Cartena comes, or Hidetsugu Ueno, because we're basically taking the world, to Manila, to the Philippines. So in that light, it's absolutely like positive 100%, and definitely not too much. So for us, like the more, for me, when I'm thinking of the Philippines, the more the merrier. Just because it's, instead of Philippines and it's bartenders being one bubble, and not everybody knows what's going on outside of this bubble. Basically, the world comes, and it just makes everyone better. So I think it's good in that sense. But then I guess on the flip side, like if I'll just talk about myself, this is like the 5th time I've been to Singapore already. It might be too much actually, but I always love it when I'm here. Like from my perspective, like I enjoy working stints at different bars, because I get to know not only these bars but the people behind the bars. Like in this trip, it's going to be more bars, so it's Adrian, it's Ina, and it's Edu and everybody else who I just met today, and then others, and then because in my opinion, it's like it's seeing Singapore, even if I've been here 5 times this year, it's seeing Singapore in a different light. But I guess like for an industry and a consumer's point of view, it can sometimes be a bit too much, especially for, okay, like a good example would be Singapore Cocktail Festival. When it first started out, for the whole week, maybe there were just maybe 25 to 30 events. This year, do you remember how many events there were?
I wouldn't be able to tell you a number. I think we had one
on
Friday.
The first day. 30.
Yeah,
right?
Crazy, yeah. That's
nuts. And I guess in that sense, it might be a bit too much, because it would be difficult to see everyone and navigate through it. So, yeah, like I feel like I do agree that small doses are good every now and then, but for, I guess, less developed cocktail cultures, for me, the more the merrier, especially in the Philippines.
Will there be a bar show in the Philippines at any point, or
No.
is this something you're working towards? Or is this something that you have not considered?
Well, we've thought about it now, together with other distributors who might be interested in hosting such an event. But Tron Young, though, from the Bar Awards, is coming August 20 to 21 for the Bar Awards on tour. So there's no awarding for the Philippines. Instead, it's like just like a party in the Philippines, exploring the market, bring people together, industry people, and also guest bartenders from other countries to come and do shifts. So I guess that's the closest thing we have to a bar show. But apart from that, the only bar show we have is Whiskey Live. That's about it. But that's more whiskey.
Yeah,
right.
Of course.
But then there are some bartenders who come, like for example, last year, Philip and also Gab from Manhattan came, and then all the brand ambassadors, obviously, who are bartenders, came as well. So it was like kind of like a nice little reunion. So that's the closest thing we have to a bar show.
Cool. Last question I ask everyone: if you could choose your last drink, what would your last drink be?
That is
a good one. Could be anything.
Right now, for me, I'm a sucker for milk punches.
Oh, really?
Right now, but normally I would answer old fashions. So any milk punch.
Oh yeah, cool.
For me.
Cool, fantastic. Thank you very much for spending the time, David.
Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed our interview with David. We are Unjiggered_media on Instagram, and you can follow our accounts at mmariotti89 for Michele, Alex J. Murphy for myself, and Adrian Bessa for Adrian. Thank you for listening.